A very good afternoon to all of you, and welcome to our webinar on achieving results through personal accountability. Your ability to take accountability defines the flexibility your organization seeks to deliver customer satisfaction in a demanding and competitive market. This webinar will help you identify key organization results and align yourself to them. It will help you understand what drives your behavior and helps you to change it for the good of your organization and yourself. These are just a few of the many things you will learn today. Without much further ado, let me introduce our esteemed expert, Mr. C.N. Murthy. C.N. Murthy brings to a table a wealth of knowledge and skills in the areas of personal mastery, emotional intelligence, change management, and professional and leadership development. He has had a long stint working for ITC Limited and retired from a large MNC in the packaging industry as the COO and ED in charge of India operations. Before we begin, I would like to remind you all that you can send in your questions using the chat section in the control panel to the right of your screen during the course of the webinar. We will take these questions up one by one post the talk. Our best attempt would be to answer as many questions as possible. We hope that you enjoy the webinar and take home some key learnings that you can implement immediately. I would now like to hand over to Mr. Murthy.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Shrey. And good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. Since we are working with a very, very tight time constraint of about 1 hour, the way I would like to structure this is to lead you through some concepts and some understanding for about 45 minutes, and post which we will spend about 15 minutes answering questions. Achieving results through personal accountability. Personal accountability is a subject that we all encounter in our lives, be it at work, be it at home, be it it's everywhere in society at large. We all have to be accountable for something. But it is, while dealing with this subject, what we will be focusing on are these four key concepts. The first is the importance of clarifying key organizational results and aligning people's work objectives. The second is we need to understand ourselves a little bit. We need to understand what drives our behavior and how this understanding will effectively change our behavior. Then we need to demystify a word called ownership. We all understand ownership, but we understand ownership in different ways. So we will spend a little while understanding the concept of ownership. And lastly, we are also sure that whatever we do, whatever results we get through people, we can only achieve that through communication. Communication drives ownership. So we will spend a few minutes dwelling on the subject of systemic communication. So here's the core principle. The core principle is simple. There is no accountability if we do not have a result to work towards. So accountability begins by clearly defining results. This is core. How often in our lives do we talk about people becoming accountable, and when we check with them, they are not aware of what we are holding them accountable for. Guess what? Partners in Leadership is a leading organization which has been researching the subject of accountability for years and years and years. And they conducted an accountability survey. And they found that over 70 to 75% of organizations were not sure about what key results were. When they surveyed leaders in the organization and asked them, what are the key results your organization is working for, they got mixed answers. Key results are, what are key results? Key results are results not achieving which is not an option. So when you want to be personally accountable or you want to hold someone else accountable, you begin by being sure that we know what results we are working towards. Here's the next one. If I ask you, what is your job? What would you say? My guess is that most of us would come up with your job designation. I happen to be a sales manager. I happen to be in marketing. I happen to be in production. I am the CEO of a company. But these are this is your job. This is your role. What happens if doing your job becomes synonymous with achieving the result? So if we all get focused on achieving results in an organization, how clear will we be about achievement of results? Here's a brilliant model. Understanding ourselves, results. If we want to drive results, how does anyone get results? We get results by doing something. It's our actions that deliver results. Actions by just, I have a saying, good intentions do not deliver good results. It's good actions that deliver good results. So we need to actually do something to deliver results. Now, if there are 21 in the room, and if all of us have to deliver a given result, how likely is it that each one of us will be doing things different from the other person? A would follow one path, B would do something else, C would do something else totally, but all of them are working for the same result. So the big question then becomes, why do we do what we do to get a given result? The answer is clear. It is because we believe that that is what we should do to get that result. It is our thinking, it is our belief, it is the values we hold that control our actions. We do things because we believe that that is the right thing to do. And why? And different people with different value systems will have different beliefs. So it is our values, our fears, our feelings, and our thinking. Most importantly, our thinking. And our thoughts control our actions. And when we do something, results follow. All actions will deliver results. It's just that some actions will deliver the results you want, while as other actions will deliver results that you may not want. So when a person does something which does not deliver a result, what do we as leaders do? We tell people, hey, stop doing that. Start doing this. That is performance management. That is an appraisal system. Most of our appraisal conversations go around what a person should be doing, what a person should not be doing. And so we are stuck at that level. But where do we go to the levels of beliefs and experiences? Our beliefs are created by the experiences that we have picked up in our lives. And these experiences will give rise to beliefs we have, and those beliefs will then determine what we do. If we restrict ourselves to only the results and actions, then we do not think about beliefs and experiences. Accountability comes when you can go below the levels of actions and dive deep down to understand ourselves, our beliefs, our values. And when we do that, we become empowered to be able to control the actions we take.
So, sorry to interrupt, sir. I think there's the presentation is not shared. Can you please check that? We're getting only the video feed.
Is this shared?
Not yet, sir.
Oh, I'm so
Yeah.
sorry. Is this shared?
Yeah, now I can see the screen, sir, but can you just the presentation? Yes, thank you very much, sir.
Oh, Shrey, I'm so sorry. I wish
No problem.
I'd been told. Okay. Is this clear now? This is where I was.
Yes, now it's visible, sir.
Okay, thanks for pointing that out to me.
No problem.
And, you know, we often talk about something called culture. And if I ask people, is it easy to change the culture of an organization, a culture of a team? The common answer is no, it's not. It's very difficult to change culture. But if we look at this pyramid, results, actions, beliefs, experience, there are three of these which determine the culture of a place. Culture is defined by the actions people take, the beliefs and the thinking of the people in the organization or in the team, and the experiences we give each other. So if we actually individually want to change culture and get people to be more accountable, we need to, it is not sufficient to just tell people that, hey, start being accountable. Do this, do that. We need to give people an experience of accountability that will change their beliefs. And when their beliefs change, they will automatically start doing the right things and show that they are accountable. So this is a key model that we can use to understand our own behaviors and that of others. Here's a dictionary definition of accountability that I picked up from the Webster's Dictionary. The dictionary defines accountability as a subject to having to report, explain, or justify, responsible, answerable. If I ask you to think about this definition of accountability a little bit, what comes to your mind? Focus on the three words that I have just highlighted. Subject to, explain, justify. Oh, so full of negative energy. It's just sufficient to drive a person down and get him on the defensive, isn't it? So even the definition that the dictionary has for accountability is a negative definition. No wonder people run away from becoming accountable. Who wants to be subject to something? Who wants to be explaining himself or justifying himself? So if we follow the dictionary definition of accountability, it almost drives us into being non-accountable. But here is another definition. The typical accountability question is, who is accountable for failing to achieve the result? But here is the accountability question we should be asking ourselves. Who is accountable for achieving the result? So if you look at these two questions, what do you observe? The first question, who is accountable for failing to achieve the result, is looking back. And that is what comes from the definition of accountability that we just saw. This is justifying. Whereas the accountability question, which asks who's accountable for achieving the result, is forward thinking. This is before the event. This brings clarity into accountability. This tells us exactly what is expected of each and every one of us. And if you link this with the premise we had, which says that accountable behavior begins with knowing the result that you are accountable for, it actually serves the purpose of defining the result. Moving to another topic, okay, I'm going to put up a collage of objects, and I will give you 4 seconds, a long 4 seconds to look at them. And I would like each one of you to do one thing. Just take a sheet of paper and write down, or you can do this even mentally, just note as many objects as you can see and keep a tag of the number of objects you can see, and be prepared to tell us what the objects are. So here goes. Okay, that was a long 4 seconds, wasn't it? So in your chat box, would you like to put down how many objects each one of you were able to note and identify there? I'm going to stop share screen for a while, and I'm getting onto the chat box. Here you are. So can we see the... So how many objects were you able to see? Just type the number in.
So getting replies of 10 to 12, 4, 5, somebody said 3. Someone is
I can
saying
see the chat now. 5, 5, 4, 6.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Robin Fernandez, 15. You got sharp eyesight and a roving eye. Great stuff. So let's get back to share screen, and I will now share my screen again. I'm going to put up the same object here. This is a collage that I had put up. Now look at it and see what all you missed. So if as participants, if each one of us shared what we saw, and we collectively add together all the objects we have seen individually, what is the likelihood that we would have captured many more objects on the screen than we were able to do ourselves? What would you say? Is it likely that we would be able to identify many more objects collectively looking at it than by looking at it individually? What would your answer be? I'm going to take that, since I'm not able to see your chat box, I'm going to say that as most definitely. If we listen to each other, and if we hear that, what each one of us saw, then we would collectively be able to see more objects than we were able to see alone. Okay, this just leads me into the topic of feedback. Feedback is just this. Feedback is a way of knowing reality. When I ask for feedback, I'm asking people to give me what they have seen about a situation. I go back to the Partners in Leadership Workplace Accountability study, and here is what they say. When the question asked was, when it comes to how well people in the organization see things, 20% said people constantly seek and offer feedback. 64% said feedback usually only happens when things really go wrong. And 16% said feedback rarely happens. The best organizations in the world, the top performing organizations of the world, put in processes in place where asking for feedback and giving feedback becomes a way of life, where every day feedback is given and feedback is asked for. Feedback is not given in a performance appraisal once a year or twice a year. Feedback is given almost all the time. So there would be many reasons why people hesitate to ask for feedback and why people hesitate to give feedback. So giving feedback and asking for feedback is a process that needs to be perfected so that we are able to see reality far better than we can see it ourselves. So here is a choice that I would have. Now, once we see reality, I call it, we have a choice to make. Reality can be frightening. When things are going wrong, like they often do, what happens to us? When things go wrong, we become victims and we blame others. We give personal excuses. We wait till things get better, or we are just stuck and we get helpless. When we go above a line, we exercise a choice to move ahead and become empowered. We implement and achieve results. We find solutions, own reality, and we acknowledge reality. And that is what makes us accountable. The problem is that in everyday life, things are bound to go wrong. And when things go wrong, it's almost natural to feel bad about it. We feel frustrated, we feel upset, and we feel dejected. And that is when we begin to play the blame game. And when we play the blame game, we are going below the line. And when we go below the line, we become a victim. And not only do we become a victim, we get stuck. We are not able to move ahead. We're not able to find solutions. Is it wrong to feel bad when things go wrong? Probably not. It's natural and instinctive to feel bad and go below the line. However, it is wrong to stay there. If we want to be accountable, we should understand the feelings we have, get it out of our system, and take the conscious step to move above the line. And when we move above the line, we ask ourselves, what is reality? What has actually happened here? And when we have seen reality, we then begin the journey towards becoming accountable. Okay, so let's move ahead here. When you blame others, you give up your power to change. So when we talk about accountability, we need to ask ourselves this question. Am I going below the line? And am I in bed with blame, excuse, and denial? Or have I gone above the line and am I taking ownership for where I am? Am I becoming responsible? And then only can you become accountable. To be able to do this, the first step is to see reality. If you cannot understand what has happened and what is causing the failure, you don't see it. And seeing it, we say, has more to do with your ears than it does with your eyes. We see things when we hear people tell us what's wrong. And we recognize what's going wrong far easier than when we see it with our own eyes. So seeing it is the first step to becoming accountable. And seeing has more to do with your ears than with your eyes. This is where the skill of seeking and asking for feedback becomes extremely important. So asking for feedback, there are two ways in which we can ask for feedback. The first question is, do you have any feedback for me? And most often when we are asked to collect feedback, here's what we do. We go to a person, stand in front of him and say, hey, do you have any feedback for me? And what's the answer you get? No, I don't have any feedback for you. No, not at all, sir. Does it mean that he does not have any feedback? Probably not. He probably has feedback, but he doesn't want to give you feedback. But if you go back to my results pyramid, what experience have you given him when you have asked this question, do you have any feedback for me? The experience if you read between the lines, there is a thought here that, you know what, you may not have any feedback for me. So he probably hears that and he says, no, I don't have any feedback for you. Whereas against that, if your question is, what feedback do you have for me? Oops, sorry. What feedback do you have for me? What is implicit in that question? What feedback do you have for me? What is implicit is a statement which says, I know you have feedback for me, and I want that feedback. So the experience you're giving the person from whom you're wanting feedback is you're telling him, I know you have feedback, so I want to hear that feedback. So the way we ask for feedback will determine how we get feedback. What do we do once we get feedback? We use filters. So I still remember there was this engineer I was working with, and he came to me and he said, you know, Mr. Murthy, I get a lot of feedback, but you know what, this feedback, I'll tell you what I do. When I get the feedback, the first thing I think about it, and I really do. And I ask myself, is this accurate or inaccurate feedback? And guess what? A lot of the feedback is junk. And then I ask the question, does this have a basis or does it have no basis? And a lot of those feedback that I get is out. And then I ask myself a question, is this pertinent or irrelevant? Less feedback. And then I think about what is left and I ask, is it right or wrong? And guess what? At the end of all this, there really is no feedback for me. And he gave me a smirk. But here's the question. Does this gentleman get feedback or does he not get feedback? Reality is he gets a lot of feedback. But he filters it down and decides that he has no feedback. So when somebody gives you feedback, trying to help you to understand the reality of your situation, is this feedback about how he sees you, about how he perceives you, what you have done and what you are? Or is it related to his understanding of accuracy, pertinent, irrelevant, right, wrong? Feedback is more about the way he perceives you, the way he perceives what you have done. And those are the experiences you're giving each other. So when we are talking about being accountable, you have to ask yourself the question, is it okay for me to allow that person to have this perception about me? And if it's okay to allow that person to have that perception about you and the work you have done, then maybe you can ignore all the feedback. But if that person perceives you the way he does, and it doesn't help you in achieving your results, then you have to be accountable enough to ask him what gave him that perception. And the only way you'll be able to change his perception is by going back to your results pyramid and changing his belief by giving him experiences that will allow him to change his perception. And that is the way you would use your feedback to improve your performance. The key question is therefore, is that a belief I want them to have? And if that is not a belief you want them to have, then it is for you to do things, take actions, give them experiences that would help them change that belief. So we come to the topic of ownership. And when we talk about ownership has 4 levels. And here's an example. Here's a story that I often tell people to explain to them the levels of ownership. I land at Mumbai airport very, very often. And I come out and I try to get into a cab. I pick up one of the, either the Olas or the Ubers or one of the other cabs. When I get in, the driver starts his car, but does he wear a seatbelt? He doesn't wear a seatbelt. But when he's nearing the cop at the end of the road, he pulls that seatbelt and he just holds it in front of him and lets go. Now, wearing seatbelt is a safety requirement. So it's by law, you have to wear a seatbelt. Does this driver agree that he should wear a seatbelt? Does he take ownership for wearing a seatbelt? Obviously, he neither agrees that he should wear a seatbelt, nor does he wear a seatbelt. He doesn't want to get involved. Does he own it? No, he doesn't own it. There is another person I know who comes up and says, seatbelts are for safety, and I know I should wear a seatbelt. But guess what? When I drive around in Mumbai city, my speed limit is, I cannot go about 20, 30 kilometers an hour. So yeah, it's not for me then. I'll wear a seatbelt when I'm on the highway, when I travel fast. But inside the city, there's no need for me to wear a seatbelt. So here's a person who agrees that seatbelts should be worn, but he says, I don't need to wear it now because it's not for me. Does he have ownership? A little better, but not enough. A third level. Here is a person who argues with me. And he says, you know what? Wearing seatbelts? No, wrong. Why? Because seatbelts are so badly designed. And we should never be forced to wear a seatbelt. Let them go and improve the design of the seatbelts first. And he will give you chapter and verse, lots of examples where people have died because they haven't been able to get out of a flaming vehicle because the seatbelt couldn't be disengaged, and so on. And so he says, you know what? Seatbelts are not to be worn. But then he comes up and says, but having said that, the rules, the law says we must wear a seatbelt. So I disagree. We should not be made to wear a seatbelt. But because it is the law, I will not break the law. And I will wear it. This person is a person who complies with law. He will do as is told, but he does not agree. Slight bit more of ownership, right? But he does wear a seatbelt. And finally, we have a person who's bought in, who agrees that seatbelts should be worn. He gets involved, and not only that, he will make sure that the errant driver that I was talking about earlier stops his car and wears a seatbelt before he proceeds. He owns it. So you see, when we talk about levels of ownership, all of us at different times are at different levels of ownership. When we see people around us, we see people at different levels of ownership. And accountability comes from ownership. So we have to ask ourselves, are we bought in? Will we do as we are to, or are we in the forget it stage where I don't own it? People who are uninvolved in the first and the second level don't do anything. And its results come only when they get engaged. So people in this level of ownership are not contributing to results. So their accountability for results is not there. But accountability for results is there at both these levels. Some people who will do because they are complying with the rules and the laws, and the people who are bought in. And it is the job of the people who are bought in to convert people who are at the will do as told level and pick them up and bring them into the bottom stage. And the key difference between a person in the bottom stage and the will do as told stage is knowledge. There is something that a person who is bought in knows that the person in the will do as told stage does not know, does not understand. So the moment the person who is at the bottom stage is able to explain, or to the person who is still at the compliance stage, you will be able to get him into the ownership, the fully I own it level. So what is the own it conversation? The own it conversation is simple. You're accountable to be bought in. Every one of us has to be bought in for the results that we have to deliver. And we need to have the conversation that will allow us to buy in and invest in the deliverables and deadlines related to achieving key results. Who has this conversation? Is it someone else who holds this conversation with us? No, this is a conversation we have to have it with ourselves. You have to own it and have the own it conversation yourself. So to be accountable, we see reality and then own reality. And how do we own reality? We own reality by asking ourselves, what did I do that caused the situation that I find myself in today? And that's where you make the tie. And then you ask yourself the ownership question. What can I do to make sure that I never get in this stage again? So when you have done that, you have made the tie both to the past and to what you have to do. And you are accountable to have this conversation within yourself, because then and then only will you be able to drive your key results. So the ground rules of an own it conversation: you have an inherent obligation to buy in and invest in key results. You're accountable to trigger the own it conversation. The leader is accountable to persuade and convince with information. And once a decision is made, we are accountable to buy in and invest to make it happen. I'm going to spend about 5 minutes that I have on something called a conversation, on communication. Think back, two people talking to each other. Someone says, someone is holding this piece in his hand, and this person can't see, and he's describing this piece. And he says, I have definitely a fish. So there is a difference. A person has a piece with a three-pronged edge at one end, and the second person interprets it as a fish because of a communication that has been made from one to another. Then there is a communication between two people who cannot see the pieces but are trying to explain what it is to each other. And this person says, you know what, he holds it, moves his fingers around the edges, and he says, I have a plane. The other person does the same with his piece, with his back to the other person, and he comes up and says, no, mine is different. I think I have a leaf. So it is so often in life we find that when we say things to somebody else, what that person understands is very different from what meaning we had in our mind. So what happens at communication? communication, before I get into this, when I'm communicating, what is communication? I have a meaning in my mind and I talk about my meaning and I say something. So what I say is based upon the thought that I want to convey to the other person. Now, when I say something, the person to whom I'm talking hears me, but he doesn't hear what I say the way I say it, but he hears part of what I say and doesn't hear a lot of what I say. So what he hears is different from what I say. And what he hears, he interprets to create his own meaning. So when I have a meaning in my mind, I want his understanding to be the same as my meaning, but it goes through these 4 stages. I have a meaning, I want to communicate, and so therefore I say something, but my saying is not exactly my meaning. I communicate part of my meaning and may not, and communicate meaning differently. And so also the other person hears half of what I'm saying because he's bored. He doesn't understand me. Why? Because he's interpreting what he has heard and he's coming to his own conclusion. So communication, again, at 4 levels, at 4 stages of communication. When each one of us communicates, we communicate, most often we focus on facts. So this is the content level communication. So when we want to be accountable or we want to hold somebody accountable for results, we communicate content. I want you to do this. I need you to work on a concept. This is what I need you to be accountable for. So I say that as a fact. So that is a fact. I want you to work on a concept because we need a concept. But when I say this to a person, there is a relationship that comes in play. If I say we need a concept to my boss, the meaning we need a concept is very different from the meaning of we need a concept if I say this to my team worker, my employee, or a friend. Why? Because the relationship between me and him is different. And so each statement is interpreted on the basis of a relationship. And we most often only have a content level factual communication. In between, there are 2 more levels. One is called the self-revelation and the appeal. What I mean by self-revelation is the I statement. So when I communicate to a person to get a person totally aligned to my need, I need to explain to him why I want him, why I'm telling him we need a concept, why I'm making that statement. Why is that concept so important for me? So I need to bring in myself. And then I also need to tell him the reason why I'm saying this to him. Because I can't do it alone. I want to do it with you. I can only succeed if I do it with you. So if you want accountable behavior, we need to practice communication, which is not focused only on facts. We need to understand the person we are talking to, understand the relationship, take that into account in our conversation, make sure that we reveal ourselves, and then also communicate why we want the other person to be aligned with us. So if in our communication, we take all these 4 levels of communication, that is the time when we are able to make sure that there is a connect. And a connect builds ownership, and ownership delivers accountability. Just a model to show you this. I have a meaning. I say something. What I say is heard by you, and you understand something. Now, if I'm only communicating facts, I can be communicating facts about facts, the self, about you, and about relationship. Similarly, there are the same FSAR for what I say. You hear the same thing, and then there are 4 here. So if you take this entire combination, 4 into 4 into 4 into 4, there are really 256 ways of communication. But without misunderstanding, it is 1, 2, 3, 4. So the chances of misunderstanding are 252 ways of misunderstanding. So when we are talking about being clear about results, and communication is the way in which we understand and let people know what results are expected, there are more chances of misunderstanding than of understanding. And this again drives home the meaning, the importance of feedback. The only way I can make sure that there is no misunderstanding at a time when there are so many ways of misunderstanding is by clarifying, understanding. If I say something and I then ask the person, tell me what you understood. Asking for feedback. Tell me what you understood. What did I say? Gives you a chance to understand whether you are in one of these 252 ways or whether your communication has been properly understood. Therein comes the way you take ownership for your communication. So with this, personal accountability requires a shift. You need to stop externalizing, and you have to delve into yourself to understand your behavior, your actions, your beliefs, and think about what experiences are you giving others. Moving above the line, moving from blaming others to taking accountability. From doing the job to getting results. From working in silos to collaborating. And from telling people what to do to igniting their minds and getting them to be bought in. So here's the personal accountability questions in conclusion. What would be your greatest learning from this experience? What would be the one new behavior you would adopt to become more personally accountable? What would you stop doing to move above the line and become empowered? And what would you start doing to move above the line and become empowered? So these are the 4 accountable questions that you would need to answer to become more personally accountable. So with that, thank you for being here, and it's question time now. I'm going to stop sharing screen and let's get back to seeing each other.
Okay, thank you, sir. The first question we have is that what is the best way to make people understand corporate goals and make them into their own goals so that they will strive to achieve it? And how do we persuade them to do this?
Okay, so there are many questions in that one question, right? So it is, what is the best way to make people understand corporate goals and make them into their own goals so that they will strive to achieve it?
Right.
Okay. So let's look at this. So the first thing is accountability begins by explaining goals, right? And so when we set goals in an organization, what do we normally do? We decide on the what goals, right? So we all look at our strategies, we look at our corporate objectives, our organizational objectives, and we come up and say, hey, these are the specific what goals that I need to achieve. So we set our what goals. So when we set what goals, we all have something called SMART goals, right? Everybody knows SMART: specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, time bound, and we all follow that model and we set goals. Now, these goals are always set keeping in mind the vision and the mission of what we want to do. But the reality is that when we set goals, there is always a big question mark that comes up. Okay. The boss wants a goal, and the person to whom he's communicating the goal believes that it is an ambitious goal. So he wants a realistic goal, something that he's sure of being able to achieve. So the interpretation here, what is the best way to make people understand corporate goals, comes up really to my mind when I want to set a very ambitious goal, but the person's there feels stressed because there is a tension. And they come up and say that, you know what, your goal is not achievable. Look at the past. Our performance was only so many, million rupees or whatever. And you are wanting a 15% increase. How is it possible? So corporate goals then create tension. But if you ask yourself, why does that tension created when I set an ambitious goal? The reason is simple, because I don't know how to achieve that ambitious goal. The moment I know how to achieve that ambitious goal, the tension disappears. So it's because I don't know how to achieve that ambitious goal that I find it difficult to set a corporate goal. So if you want to make people understand corporate goals, you need to, and you set your ambitious goal with your clear-cut metrics, and then you ask them to also come up with the how goals. So you set what goals and you set how goals. And during review, seeking feedback, giving feedback, you work with both the what goals and the how goals and keep making your corrections, course corrections. So does that answer this question about what is the best way to make people understand corporate goals and push them into their goals that they will strive to achieve? They will not strive to achieve an ambitious goal that they do not own because they don't know how to achieve it. So if you want to make them strive to achieve it, you've got to reduce that tension. And that tension comes from not a discussion on the what goal, but a very clear discussion on the how to achieve it. And once the way is understood, the goal becomes clear and the person owns it. Here's okay. How do you make people more accountable? Brilliant. So how do you make a people more accountable? What efforts are needed for strong, positive team building? Wow, this is going to take a full 2-day workshop. Team building is not something that you can take up in just a couple of hours, leave alone in a few minutes. But let's see if I can work it. How to differentiate between ownership and self-motivation. So which one of these questions do you think I should take up first? Let me see. How do you make people more accountable? You know what my answer to that question is? You can't make anybody accountable. You have to become accountable. people have to become accountable because people take ownership. It is only when people take ownership that people become accountable. So all you can do is move people up the 4 levels of ownership. So you identify at what level of ownership are they in. So if you remember that the levels of ownership, okay, if you just remember the levels of ownership, we talked about the I don't own it, forget it stage, where the person disagrees and is uninvolved. Then there is the person who says that, I agree, but, this rule is not for me. It doesn't apply to me. It is for people in that department to do this, not for me. This is not my role. Okay. Then there are those people who will say, okay, yaar, you told me I'll do it, but you know what? I don't know why you have told me to do this because I frankly disagree. And then there are the bought-in people. So if you want to move people up and become more motivated or become more accountable, first you have to be accountable yourself. You can't push people up. You can only pull people up. So you have to be bought in and motivated yourself. You have to be accountable first. And then you have to recognize at what stage of ownership the others in your team are. And then you have to have your communication at the FSAR levels. Talking to them about the facts, why it is important, why being accountable is important, what's the benefit for them, what is the benefit for the organization. So you're bringing in the self-revelation and the appeal to them. And then you have to talk to them about, the relationship that they have with the organization and with the team. So it is only when you take all this together and that you can pull them up the levels of ownership. Once they take ownership, there is no difference between ownership and self-motivation. Would you see that? So this whole question that Nikhil has asked is about first becoming self-accountable, being bought in and invested ourselves, recognizing the levels of ownership where others are, and then pulling them up the ladder through the proper communication. Okay? Nikhil, does that answer your mind?
Yeah, you just replied, thank you.
Okay, great. So who else? Dishank has another question. How to ignite their minds? Yeah. Exactly. What's the best way to get people motivated? I'll tell you what. Most often we believe we'll get people motivated by just exciting them about results. We all get excited ourselves about what needs to be achieved, what needs to be delivered, and that's it. And we keep talking about results and results and results and results. But people don't get ignited when we only talk results. People get ignited when they own it. And that owning, if I have to get people to own something that I want them to do, and that is the essence of collaboration, I need to respect them. I need them to begin to feel that they respect me. And we need to develop that relationship with each other. So people get ignited when they feel they are working for a cause. And the cause is not just results, but they are working for an organization, for you as a boss. And they feel that they cannot be without their contributions there. They're ignited when they go home. Why are they ignited when they go home? Because in the family, they feel there is a relationship, there is respect for each other, and they feel ignited. And that's exactly the sort of a situation we need to build when we are talking about a workplace. And once again, how do we do this? It's the way we have a conversation and how we explain ourselves clearly, openly, and share so that we have a common mind, a mental map.
Okay. Sir, I'm sorry, but I think that would have had to be the last question
Okay.
because we have run out of time. I'm sure, sir, that it will be all right if the participants can email the questions and perhaps you can respond
Most
with a short
definitely.
answer. Yeah.
Most definitely. And thank you very much for being there.
Thank you. Thank you, sir, for that wonderful webinar. I'm sure the audience has gained great insights on building personal accountability and achieving results. Many thanks to all of you for being attentive and for those wonderful questions which have enriched this webinar for everyone. We conduct several such webinars on a regular basis and have many detailed workshops covering all aspects of behavior and change, like the one sir mentioned as an answer to one of the questions. So if you think we should connect to your HR or training manager for discussing this in more details, please fill in their contact details in the form you will receive post the webinar via email. Once again, thank you very much for joining, and please do not forget to fill in the feedback form that you will receive shortly. This will only help us deliver to your expectations. Have a great day and goodbye.
Bye, everyone.